Coming up on market shares, oil prices are surging with no end in sight for the war in the Middle East. How markets are responding.
And one of the most disruptive work strikes in recent times just came to an end. Why port employees were stepping off the job.
Plus, the September jobs report was released just earlier today. Hold on to your wallet because market share starts right now.
Good afternoon and welcome into Market Shares. I'm Carson Fowler.
And I'm Sean Dempsey. We are about 15 minutes past the closing bell this Friday afternoon. Let's take a look at how the major indexes ended on the week so far. Carson, want to get us started?
We'll start with the Dow, Sean. The Dow, another major stock indexes rallied today after a better than expected jobs report. Today, the Dow and the S&P 500 climbed nearly a full point after a lackluster week. Record close for the Dow, up $340 per share of where it was this morning. Solid labor market figures signal overall economic strength and resilience in our economy. Investors view this as a positive indicator for future economic growth. Top gainers on the Dow and S&P: J.P. Morgan, American Express, Momentum Holdings LLC, and Decker Outdoor Corp.
Talk about that jobs report too. 254,000 jobs were added in September, better than 150,000 than expected. Also looking at the NASDAQ as well, mainly down a little bit because Tesla was missing on their deliveries, but also tensions in the Middle East have been rising as well. So obviously that's not great for the overall indexes.
Talk about Tesla later in the show too.
We will talk about Tesla later in the show. It's also going to be interesting how the NASDAQ does going forward. Ending this year, it's up 20% so far year to date. So great job for those tech stocks. Well, that's all we got for our market update, but let's get into our market movers. And the first mover we have to break down today is Uber. Uber stock is down about 2% on the week. This could be because of a viral story that has been on the internet. A New Jersey couple were in a severe car accident when their Uber driver sped through a red light and were T-boned. The accident caused serious physical injuries that require surgery. The couple tried to take Uber to court, but were denied because they previously agreed to Uber's updated terms and conditions. The couple said it was their daughter who agreed to the terms and conditions and that it was on Uber Eats and not for Uber rides. It's horrible to see that a large company like Uber can get away with not protecting their customers and simply acting as a third-party service, trying not to be involved. This certainly hurt their stock price this week and their brand image in general. Really, really sad story, Carson.
Yeah, Sean, this doesn't look good for Uber at all.
No.
So if for our viewers at home that don't know what really went on here, this is a mandatory arbitration clause case here. So Uber went ahead and hid some of these things in their in a 12-page terms of service agreement that obviously there was some discrepancy. Apparently the kid had the chance to get on their Uber Eats account and
that's the main thing with the case too, is that the parents are claiming that the daughter was the one who accepted the terms and conditions, but obviously she wasn't in the ride. So interesting. Well, let's get to our next mover.
Yep, Nike down 7.5% this week. 8% rather. They're in the transition to a new CEO. That's Elliott Hill. This comes after the company withdrew its annual revenue target. It's created some uncertainty. Nike also postponed its investor day scheduled for later November. Nike CFO Matthew Friend said, quote, that these decisions would give Hill much needed flexibility to evaluate Nike's strategies and business trends moving forward. Some say that Nike is facing larger problems relative to its business model, but others are saying it's just kind of lost its cool factor.
Yeah, Nike slumped so far year to date, falling more than 25% prior to the CEO change-up that was announced on September 19th. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how Nike, changes their business model moving forward and how they adjust to other brands.
I got Nike's on right now. I still think Nike's cool.
Yeah, you do have Nike's on right now.
That's right.
Let's get into our last mover on this week, which is Levi's. The stock was down about 8% on Thursday and is down about 10% on the week. Levi Strauss delivered mixed quarterly results and said it was looking to sell its Dockers business, which is funny, Carson, because I was wearing Dockers yesterday. So, maybe I should get rid of my Dockers and they're out of stock.
Sean, it's funny enough. I was literally going to mention that because you're also wearing khakis today, and they talked about the reason that they're getting away from Dockers and selling khakis is because that was a mainstay for customers in the 1990s and 2000s, but it simply has just fallen out of style. I think that's crazy. I was wearing khakis yesterday.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe.
But sales were largely flat at $1.2 billion compared to $1.1 billion just a year ago.
That's right.
And the September jobs report came out just earlier this morning, and it was quite better than expected. The economy added far more jobs as the unemployment rate fell to 4.1%, down 0.1 percentage points from the month before. This rise also spilled over to wages as hourly earnings increased almost half a percentage point and are up 4% from a year ago. With these results, the report eases concerns about how the labor market is doing and is also a sign that the Fed can continue cutting interest rates. Earlier this week, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said he expects the Fed to move in quarter-point increments at least through the end of the year.
And OpenAI received a $4 billion revolving credit line, giving it quite a bit of liquidity moving forward. The AI and technology company is now being valued at more than $150 billion and is receiving more than $6 billion from several large investment firms, including JP Morgan, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Goldman Sachs. In a statement released, OpenAI stated, quote, "This means we now have access to over $10 billion in liquidity, which gives us flexibility to invest in new initiatives and operate with full agility as we scale." OpenAI generated $300 million last month, up a whopping 1,700% from the beginning of last year. How about that, Sean?
Pretty impressive, I have to say. Well, it's time for a wellness check on CVS Health. Shares of the company are down over 20% on the year as they struggle with higher than expected medical costs in its insurance unit. As a result, the company is considering breaking itself up. One option being considered is splitting up its retail pharmacy and insurance units. It would be quite the reversal for the company, though. CVS has spent tens of billions of dollars to turn itself into a one-stop health destination for its patients. This may translate to more lost profits, though. The healthcare giant has slashed its full-year earnings guidance for the third consecutive quarter.
Staying in the healthcare sector, Humana's stock suffered a sharp drop, you can see on our screen, after a shakeup in Medicare Advantage ratings. Shares fell more than 15%, its worst plunge since 2009. The health insurer says, quote, "Its commitment to quality is unwavering," and it claims there could be some errors in these ratings, which it plans to challenge in the near future. Humana aims to get back to a 3% profit margin by 2027. However, analysts believe the exact impact of the shock will hinder these efforts going forward. Humana shares are down 40% this year.
American EV maker Tesla reported over 462,000 vehicle deliveries in the third quarter. Despite that being a 6% increase in growth year over year, Tesla stock dipped 4.5% as that number fell just short of Wall Street's expectations. Still, CNBC says Tesla remains on track to reach its goal of 1.8 million deliveries by the end of 2024. Tesla plans to release its full third quarter financial report later this month, providing further insights into its overall performance.
And coming up on market shares after a week of unrest, U.S. dock workers return to the ports today. How the two sides came to an agreement when we return.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
Welcome back to Market Shares. Thursday evening, the International Longshoremen's Association and the U.S. Maritime Alliance struck a temporary agreement to suspend the port strike. The deal put an end to the strike before it could wreak some serious havoc on the U.S. and its global economies. Here is with more is our Market Shares analyst, Ethan Kraut. Ethan.
Hey Carson, in the deal agreed to by the ILA and the USMX, dock workers will receive a 62% wage increase, bringing their hourly pay up from $39 an hour to $63 an hour. While not quite the 77% raise the union was searching for, it is certainly a substantial increase in pay. The USMX had offered only a 50% increase to wages, but faced pressure from the Biden administration to increase wages. Here's Biden earlier this week on the matter.
They've made incredible profits, over 800% profit since the pandemic. And the owners are making tens of millions of dollars in this. The last thing they need is to profit off of this. It's time for them to sit at the table and get this strike done.
The shipping companies have seen profits skyrocket since the pandemic, thanks in part to government stimulus packages. Biden released a statement after the two sides agreed to the deal, reading, quote, "I want to applaud the International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance for coming together to reopen the East Coast and Gulf ports. Today's tentative agreement on a record wage and an extension of the collective bargaining process represents critical progress towards a strong contract," end quote. As you mentioned earlier, this is only a temporary agreement. The deal is set to expire on January 15th, and if the two sides cannot come to an agreement by then, we'll be looking at another strike.
Ethan, what else is the ILA looking for in its permanent contract with the USMX?
Yeah, at this point, the number one issue for the ILA is protection from automation. And recently, ports have seen an increase in the use of cranes and driverless trucks, which lead to less dock workers working on the job. Now, the ILA wants airtight language in their new contract, which protects them from both automation and semi-automation. Along with that, they want to see a larger pay raise. As I mentioned before, they were looking for a 77% increase, and they only got 63, so you could expect them to be looking for something closer to that 77 number.
Ethan, so obviously right now, this is a tentative agreement that extends where these two sides want to be until January 15th. What are some of the negative impacts from this strike if no deal can be reached in January?
Yeah, you saw some panic about the strike currently, even though it ended. This could cost the economy up to $5 billion a day if we see a strike in January. Now, this has a much larger impact on exports rather than imports. 2 out of every 3 shipping containers exported from the U.S. are exported through the East Coast, where a strike we would see in January like we did this week. More imports come in from the West Coast as they're coming in from Asia. But if we see another strike in January, you could certainly see lots of economic issues with that, guys.
Thank you, Ethan. And as tensions across the Middle East rise, oil prices are surging with uncertainty in one of the world's precious areas for crude oil. Our Alex Burstein joins us in studio. Alex, how has this week impacted the market for oil?
Yeah, Sean, it hasn't been a great week. Big effects in the last few days after Iran fired missiles towards Israel this week. The world is now anxiously awaiting what the next move is. For the global oil market, anticipations of a possible attack have sent oil prices soaring. Iran is a global oil supplier, creating around 4% of the world's output. But despite this, one of the top possible targets for an Israeli response are Iranian oil fields. And according to Peter McGuire, CEO of financial company XM Australia, a strike could be brutal for the industry.
And this really creates much angst from a supply side if there was to be an attack on those Iranian fields. We all understand geographically where they're positioned in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, and the impact that that would have to shipping and, of course, all the crude that flows through that region.
In anticipation of a possible move, U.S. crude jumped 5% yesterday to just over $73 a barrel. This marked the largest jump since the start of the Israel-Hamas war last October. It's been a rather calm time for U.S. oil prices. Recent weeks have seen 3-year lows in gas prices, and these prices throughout the summer helped ease inflation. And even while Iran has lessened its amount of oil exported this year, the effects of a wild war could be devastating should other Gulf nations who are large oil producers be brought into the war or even just have ports cut off. The oil prices could skyrocket. plenty of hypotheticals right now, but the oil market in an extremely volatile position right now.
Alex, how high could oil prices raise to?
Yeah, right now experts are estimating it could go to about $100 a barrel. That's probably the maximum. And for some context, that would move gas prices to $3.50 to $4.50 a gallon. High, but not as high as we've seen during the COVID pandemic and years around then. For some context, if you look at the height of the Russia-Ukraine war, is about $124 a barrel. And then if you go back to some other Middle Eastern conflicts, such as the Saudi Arabian embargoes of the 1970s, there was gallons that cost as much as $11, which is $60 in today's money. So there's been similar conflicts with worse effects in the past. Right now, things are going to be sticking in around that $3.50 to $4.50 range.
Alex, 33% of the world's oil output comes from the Middle East. You mentioned earlier that striking some of these oil zones could be a possibility. How real is that possibility?
It's definitely a possibility, and the interesting thing right now is there's two main things being discussed for possible Israeli strikes. You have the nuclear facilities and you have these Iranian fields. The problem is the United States do not want the nuclear facilities struck because that is the most likely thing to cause a wider war in the Middle East, and that would have even greater effects on the oil industry and obviously humanitarian crises as well. So the problem right now, the U.S. does not want those struck, but the other option is these oil fields, and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has said that there's going to be a heavy price of the Iranian missile attacks. So we'll see if they do go after those oil fields in the next couple of weeks. There could be very drastic consequences.
Alex, when talking about these strikes, how devastating would a strike on these areas actually be?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the oil world has changed a lot in the last 5 or 10 years. Obviously, the Middle East still one of the top providers. Iran is about 7th in the world, in terms of how much oil is produced. But we've seen countries in South America like Brazil and even the American output of oil really increase in the recent years. Because of that, it's not as grave an effect as it would be in the past. As we mentioned, still could go up to about $3.50 to $4.50. The big problem, there's a couple of straits, a couple of areas around Iran that if they were to get blocked, about 20% of the world's oil goes through there. If that were to happen, it would be very problematic because the flow from all of these Gulf countries would be cut off. One interesting thing is America, when they had these cheap oil prices this summer, they decided to save some of the gas. They have a strategic petroleum reserve. Now they have over 300 million gallons in there. It's in case of things like this. When the oil prices raise greatly, they're going to have more time to have the prices stay low in America because of this reserve. So there are some contingency plans should things get messier in the Middle East.
Thank you so much, Alex. Coming up on market shares, almost $34 billion in damages and counting after Hurricane Helene swept parts of the U.S., how the economy is responding after the break.
They told me a bottle couldn't dream, that I would never become a superhero. But I learned how to fly, just to come back in a new disguise and be the hero that I've always wanted to be.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Wait. Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did cats go on vacation? New York.
1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. That means it could be you, your favorite brother, your other brother, you, your football buddy, your football buddy, you, your plumber,
breathe right into your foot,
your plumber's masseuse,
yes,
you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Starbucks workers in Bellingham, Washington have agreed to join the Workers United Union. They're the 500th store to join the WUU since the first Starbucks location voted to unionize in 2021. New CEO Brian Nichols says the company is, quote, committed to bargaining as the two sides work to find a deal. Baristas sent a letter to Nicole outlining their reasons for the strike. They wrote, quote, Starbucks' ultimate success in rebuilding hinges on whether we as baristas have the support we need to do our jobs as well, so that in turn we can ensure customers enjoy their Starbucks experience and keep coming back.
On Monday, EchoStar announced it is selling Dish TV and digital business Sling to DirecTV. $1 is what DirecTV agreed to pay for Dish, while assuming the company's net debt, obviously. DirecTV and Dish will serve close to 20 million customers. DirecTV now takes on about $10 billion in debt, The deal is expected to close in the fourth quarter of 2025. EchoStar was facing the idea of bankruptcy for a while now. The company attempted to refinance some of its debt, but failed.
Major League Soccer is pairing up with German digital media platform OneFootball. The platform provides highlights, stats, and other entities to a global audience. The deal comes as the MLS is trying to expand its audience outside of the U.S. and compete with Premier Leagues in Europe. Since Lionel Messi joined the MLS, the league has gained a significant amount of traction worldwide simply because they want to watch the greatest to ever do it. Since joining Inter Miami, Lionel Messi has increased MLS attendance and sponsorship, according to league officials, making this deal a little bit more appealing.
Diamond Sports just keeps striking out. The company, which the owner of Bally Sports Network, said that they plan to drop all MLB teams from its channels besides the Atlanta Braves. Diamond has been suffering recently from cord cutting as well as a heavy debt load ever since Sinclair took over the business back in 2019. This was the acquisition which led them to file for bankruptcy. Now, some of these teams' contracts were expected to end this season, while some are not being determined by the bankruptcy process. A Diamond attorney stated, quote, to be clear, rejecting teams is not our preferred path. Our preferred path is to bring as many teams into the reorganized company's fold as possible. MLB postseason continues to roll on this week, Carson, but this is pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, so it sounds like the MLB kind of wants to get to a model where the NFL is, where they're going to give a lot of their media rights to national networks, similar like Amazon, CBS, NBC, and get away from the RSN model, which just hasn't been as profitable as of late.
Do you think it's going to work?
I don't know. I think it's just whether or not media becomes more segmented and you see more cord cutting. Like, for example, you see a lot of RSNs right now having those, for example, SNY talking about doing SNY plus, Yes plus. It's not a winning game. I think you're going to see media change really quickly, and it's just gonna get more segmented, and you just got to see where the future goes.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if it pans out.
Absolutely. Well, ripple effects from Hurricane Helene are already hitting American wallets as victims wait for basic needs from the United States government. With more on how this storm has been impacting the economy is our market shares analyst, Ben Bascuk. Ben.
Thanks, Carson. Yeah, Hurricane Helene left a path of destruction across the southeast United States this past week. Homeowners and businesses looking to rebuild could be facing substantial costs. Now, Moody Analytics predicts that the storm will cost $15 to $26 billion in property damage alone. AccuWeather estimates the total damage of economic loss could cost up to $110 billion. Now, these figures would make Helene one of the most expensive storms in our country's history. And Generac Power Systems, a popular manufacturing company known for generator production, kind of tends to swing higher during these times of natural disasters as people and agencies rush to find additional power. Now, the stock edged down around 0.5% to about $160 during market action Tuesday after adding close to 3% on Monday. Now, last week, Generac advanced over 9% total. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris took a trip to Augusta, Georgia this week where she surveyed the damage and spoke to those impacted by Helene.
FEMA is also providing tens of thousands more dollars for folks to help them be able to deal with home repair, to be able to cover a deductible when and if they have insurance, and also hotel costs. Today I'm also announcing that the President has approved the Governor's request for 100% federal reimbursement of local costs.
Ben, this is clearly going to cause a lot of people a lot of money. What is that process going to look like moving forward?
Yeah, a truly tragic event. But from an insurance perspective, this is not a major loss from that perspective. Now, the loss range for those private insurer companies is just about $5 to $8 billion. That's pretty small for what we've seen in the past for a Category 4 landfall hurricane. We remember Hurricane Ian about 2 years ago. That cost those private insurer companies about $50 billion. So much more of a major loss event. Definitely still tragic. We've seen over 200 deaths, but for those insurance companies, this is a pretty small bargain compared to what we've seen in the past.
Ben, in your opinion, what's the difference between it maybe costing $10 billion to Moody's projected, $5 to $8 billion?
Yeah, that difference is made up because the bigger number includes the economic impact, that total GDP impact that Helene had, but it doesn't count those insured losses. So that's why we're seeing that discrepancy between those two models. Now, losses in southern Appalachia, Georgia, those more inland states, those are flood losses not covered by insurance. So insurance is only covering those wind-based losses, not those surges and flood losses there. That's a problem we've seen in Florida in the past. People looking to gain money from insurance policy, they're not able to because they don't qualify those specific hurricane restrictions and specifics. Now, on average, the take-up rate for those flood insurance claims in those areas I just mentioned, those more inland areas, is just around 1%. So not very many people are having their claims taken up. Not very many people are receiving money from those private insurance companies in general overall.
Ben, Vice President Kamala Harris mentioned some of those federal grants and things that are going to cover some of those local costs. What is that going to look like on households and some of the private market insurance that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, like you said, she just announced those grants. That's something we just saw yesterday. Her and Biden came down and visited Georgia and some of those other Appalachia areas. And now we're seeing federal response finally reach. We're seeing the governor kind of fulfill his request for those FEMA funds. Now, something about those FEMA grant programs is that you can apply for those, but they are definitely not insurance. You're not getting the coverage you would get from a private insurance company, and it's not a replacement. It's a pretty small sum. So we're seeing those videos of houses being washed down the river. That FEMA grant's not going to cover those homeowners. Just about 6% of homeowners had flood policy, and like we said, only about 1% of those claims are getting taken up. And also that wind is the only thing that's going to be covered under that standard homeowners or like a condo insurance policy. Flood surges are only covered by that flood insurance. Again, I think the bigger question we have to ask with these natural disasters, with climate change in general, is are they going to cause people to move and migrate from where they live? Not necessarily, but those higher insurance rates and policies from those disasters definitely could.
Ben, we appreciate your report. Thank you. Coming up on Market Shares, a famous athlete is putting his luxury watches up for sale, where fans can purchase these items after the break.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
Fancy pants peanut butter? A big screen television? You haven't even bought a sofa yet. A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers. Feed the pig.
Welcome back into Market Shares. Patriots fans, listen up. Former quarterback Tom Brady is putting his valuable watch collection up for sale, Carson. His collection will be available this December through auction house Sotheby's as part of, quote, the GOAT collection, watches and treasures from Tom Brady.
Sean, these watches range in value between $12,000 and a whopping $800,000. $100,000. The sale also includes other items from Brady's career, including the shirt he wore during the NFL Combine. It estimated to sell for around $200,000, and also includes a jersey that he wore during his time at the University of Michigan and with the Buccaneers. He's got a helmet going on there. A lot of really good items in that.
So, Carson, let me ask you this: how much would you actually pay for a Tom Brady watch?
I hate Tom Brady. Nothing.
Nothing?
Also, dude, you're making like $300-some million with Fox over the next 7 years. Give it to charity, bro. Give it to charity.
Well,
you've made enough.
That's all the time we have for you on this episode of Market Shares. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News and like us on Facebook. I'm Sean Dempsey.
And I'm Carson Fowler. Have a great night, sir.